A thief pays beneath the earth. Gideon Shaw read the sentence from the punishment order as if the words were already older than Grace Miller's truth. The gate to the Ash River labor pits stood open behind him, a black cut in the hillside where cold mist breathed from below and settled around Grace's worn leather shoes. Morning had barely touched the pack yard, but cold dust already darkened the air, turning the pale sky gray and making every face in the crowd look distant, blurred, and unwilling to see too clearly. Grace stood with the folded order in her hands, her old gray cotton dress smudged at the hem, her faded brown coat pulled tight across her shoulders, her hair tied low with a strip of cloth that had once been blue. The pack had gathered to watch her sent down, because public shame was easier for them to call justice when everyone shared the view. Gideon stood on a wooden platform beside the pit gate, thick coat buttoned to his throat, his expression flat with the satisfaction of a man who liked rules best when they bent around the powerless. Winter medicine debt, he announced. 3 crates missing from the sickroom stores. Grace Miller held a spare key. Grace Miller cannot repay the pack in coin. Therefore, Grace Miller repays below. A murmur moved through Ash River. Some believed him because believing him was convenient. Some looked away because disbelief would require courage. Rebecca Crane stood near her family's carriage under a dark red cloak, her gloved hands folded neatly, her face arranged into sorrow that did not reach her eyes. Grace had seen the Crane wagon by the sickroom loading door 2 nights before the crates were reported missing. She had smelled pine oil on the wheels, heard a man whisper that the road east had to be taken before sunrise, and watched Rebecca's father sign a paper by lantern light. But when Grace told the council, they asked why an Omega with no family protector was walking near the stores after dark. They did not ask why the Crane wagon was there. They did not ask who profited from winter medicine leaving the pack. They asked why Grace expected to be believed. She looked now toward the sickroom windows, where old Mrs. Vale would be waiting for mint tea that would not come from Grace's hands today. She thought of the kitchen children who saved onion skins for broth, the young Omega girls who came to her when the world made them feel too small, and the fevered boy she had sat with until dawn 3 nights ago. A thief, Gideon called her. Beneath the earth, he said, as if darkness could make a lie heavier than truth. He held out a rough-work tag, stamped with black letters. Pit 12. Take it, he ordered. Grace looked at the tag, then at the pit gate, then at Rebecca Crane's clean gloves. Her voice came quietly, but it did not bend. My name is Grace Miller. Gideon's mouth tightened. Names are earned back after debt. Grace did not reach for the tag. Behind her, someone whispered that she should not make this worse. But worse had already happened when a pack could lose medicine, choose a scapegoat, and call silence repayment. She lifted her chin. A number can carry work, she said. Not a soul. The crowd went still. Gideon stepped down from the platform, anger sharpening his careful control, but before he could answer, a horn sounded from the northern road. Not the pack horn, not the pit bell. A deeper note, silver and cold, rolling over Ash River like winter entering a room. Horses appeared through the mist, black and silver banners rising behind them, and at their center rode King Elias Winterford in dark northern armor and a wolf fur cloak, tall, pale, and unsmiling. The Winter Crown Alpha had arrived early. Gideon's face went bloodless. Rebecca's gloved hands tightened. Grace stood at the mouth of the labor pits, still holding her own name like the last warm thing in the cold, while the king's silver eyes moved past the welcome road, past the council steps, and stopped on her. The northern horn faded into the mist, but its echo changed the entire pack yard. No one moved at first. Ash River had prepared a welcome table near the council hall, with polished cups, clean banners, and a breakfast meant to look generous under royal eyes. They had not prepared for King Elias Winterford to arrive at the labor pit gate before the lies had finished settling. Gideon Shaw recovered faster than the others. Men like him survived by turning panic into procedure. He stepped in front of Grace as if his body could block the king's view of the work tag still hanging from his hand. Your Majesty, Gideon called, bowing with stiff respect. We were not informed you would inspect this area before the formal reception. Elias dismounted without answering immediately. He was tall enough that the guards nearest him seemed to make room by instinct, his black armor edged with silver frostwork, his wolf fur cloak dark from the cold morning mist. His face was pale, sharp, and unreadable, the kind of calm that made excuses sound loud before they were spoken. His silver eyes moved from the open pit gate to the punishment order in Grace's hands, then to the black-lettered tag Gideon had tried to give her. A clean report means nothing if the truth is kept underground, Elias said. The words were quiet, but they moved through the crowd with more weight than the horn. Rebecca Crane lowered her gaze for half a second, then lifted it again, trying to restore the soft sorrow she had worn so carefully. Grace saw the crack. She had been watching Rebecca for days, not because she wanted enemies, but because people who stole medicine from the sickroom rarely stopped at one lie. Grace had known Ash River's sickroom better than anyone with a title. She knew which shelves held lavender for sleep, which jars held mint for nausea, which winter tonics were counted twice before snow. She had spent years moving between kitchen smoke and sickroom steam, carrying bowls of broth, washing cups, folding blankets, and speaking gently to frightened children who woke asking if medicine meant they were dying. She had a spare key because the old healer trusted her to enter when fever did not wait for morning. That key had become a chain the moment Rebecca needed one. Gideon turned to the crowd. The woman was lawfully sentenced for winter medicine debt. The pit assignment has already been recorded. Elias looked at Grace. Not through her. Not past her. At her. Is that true? The question was so simple it nearly hurt. No one in the council had asked it that way. They had asked why she was near the stores, why she expected the Cranes to lie, why she thought a spare key made her trustworthy instead of suspicious. Grace tightened her hold on the punishment order. The sentence was recorded, she said. The truth was not. A whisper moved through the packyard. Gideon's jaw hardened. She is attempting to delay repayment. Elias's gaze shifted to him. I did not ask you. The stillness after that was colder than mist. Grace felt the eyes of Ash River on her, waiting for fear to make her smaller. She thought of Mrs. Vale waiting for tea, of the children who would cough when the medicine shelves stayed empty, of the young Omegas who had learned to apologize before asking for help. The medicine was not lost, she said. It was moved. Rebecca's face tightened before she could hide it. Elias noticed. Gideon noticed Elias noticing, and that was when fear entered the overseer's eyes. Your Majesty, the pits are not suitable for royal presence, Gideon said quickly. The air below is rough, and the workers are not prepared. Elias looked toward the dark opening in the hillside, where cold breath rose from the earth and carried the smell of coal, wet stone, and hidden labor. Then we go down now, he said. Grace looked at the pit gate, then at the king. She expected him to order her dragged below, to let the inspection swallow her into more questions she would not be allowed to finish. Instead, Elias held out one gloved hand toward the work tag Gideon still carried. Not that, he said. Gideon blinked. Your Majesty? Elias's voice turned colder. If she enters under my inspection, she enters by her name. Grace's heart struck once, hard and bright. In the gray morning, at the mouth of the place meant to erase her, the Winter Crown Alpha had made her name the first rule the pits would have to obey. The pit gate opened with a groan that traveled through the ground before it reached the air. Grace stepped forward only after Elias did, not because she trusted the darkness below, but because he had made the first law of that darkness her name. Gideon followed close behind with 2 Ash River guards, while Rebecca remained above near the council yard, her red cloak sharp against the mist and her face too still to be innocent. The stairway into the labor pits was carved through damp stone, wide enough for carts, narrow enough to make every breath sound borrowed. Lanterns hung along the walls, their yellow light caught in cold dust and cold vapor. With each step down, the pack yard faded behind them, and the world became earth, metal, smoke, and the low scrape of work that never reached the houses above. Grace knew the smell before she knew the place. Ash River had always carried it faintly, on boots, on carts, on the sleeves of workers who came to the kitchen too tired to lift their spoons. But below, it was everywhere, thick enough to cover lavender, mint, broth, and every gentle scent that used to follow her from the sickroom. Gideon seemed relieved by that. As you can see, Your Majesty, the pits operate under standard debt labor rules. Workers are assigned numbers for efficiency, not disrespect. Elias did not answer. His silver eyes moved across the first chamber, where men and women in gray work coats paused beside stacked baskets and sorting tables. No chains. No open cruelty made for easy judgment. Only exhaustion, silence, and faces trained not to hope when someone powerful entered. A young Omega girl near the water barrel lost her grip on a tin cup. It clattered against the stone, and she flinched before anyone spoke. Grace moved without thinking. She picked up the cup, rinsed it once, and handed it back. "What is your name?" she asked softly. The girl looked at Gideon first. Grace shook her head. "Say your name first. A number can carry work, not a soul." The girl swallowed. "Anna." Grace smiled faintly. "Then drink, Anna." Elias had stopped walking. The lantern light cut along the hard planes of his face, but something in his expression had gone still in a different way. Not suspicion, recognition beginning before proof. Gideon noticed and hurried to fill the silence. Pit workers often become sentimental. The environment encourages dependency among lower ranks. Elias inhaled once, slow and quiet. Grace did not see why that mattered at first. Then the air changed. Not for the pit. For him. Beneath cold dust and wet stone, beneath smoke and metal, something reached him that no ledger had recorded. Dried lavender from Grace's coat, rain on pine wood from the morning air trapped in her hair, warm broth memory from the sickroom, and the stubborn gentleness of someone who had carried care into a place built to erase it. Elias turned toward her fully. The mate bond struck him not like hunger, not like possession, but like a silver bell sounding once inside a frozen cathedral. His hand tightened at his side, then released. He did not move closer. He did not touch her. He only looked at Grace as if the earth had hidden a crown beneath cold dust and expected him not to know. Gideon frowned. "Your Majesty?" Elias's voice came low, controlled, and colder because it had to hold back everything the bond had awakened. "What did you call her in your ledger?" Gideon hesitated. "Pit 12, winter medicine debt." Elias's eyes did not leave Grace. "I asked for her name," he said, "not the number you used to erase it." The chamber fell silent. Grace felt the attention of every worker turned toward her, but this time it did not press her down. It lifted something inside her that the pits had not yet managed to bury. "Grace Miller," she said. Elias bowed his head by the smallest degree, a king acknowledging a truth before a court made of stone and coal. "Grace Miller," he repeated. "Will you speak under crown protection?" Grace looked at Elias through the coal-lit dark, and the word protection sounded almost unreal beneath the earth. In Ash River, protection had always belonged to people with family names, council seats, thick winter coats, and keys that opened more than sickroom doors. She had never imagined it could be offered to someone standing in dust with a punishment order still folded in her hand. Around them, the pit workers waited without pretending not to listen. Anna held her tin cup close to her chest. Older men near the sorting tables lowered their tools slowly. A woman with gray streaks in her hair pressed one hand to her throat, as if hearing Grace's name spoken by the king had loosened something there too. Gideon Shaw stepped forward before Grace could answer. "Your Majesty, formal testimony should be taken above ground, after the worker is processed. Pit protocol requires intake before statement." Elias turned his head toward him. "Your protocol named an innocent woman by a number before hearing her truth." Gideon's mouth tightened. "Innocence has not been established. Neither has guilt," Elias said. "Yet you built her sentence faster than her defense." The words moved through the chamber like cold water finding every crack in stone. Grace felt the mate bond in the air without fully understanding it. It did not pull her toward Elias like a command. It did not make her feel claimed. It felt more like being seen by something ancient that had waited quietly behind the world until someone finally said her name correctly. Elias kept his distance, and that distance mattered. It allowed her fear to stand beside her courage instead of being swallowed by his power. She took one breath, then another. "I will speak," she said. Gideon's eyes sharpened. "Careful, Grace. False claims against a ranking family could increase your debt." Elias's silver gaze cut to him. "Threaten her again, and your authority in this inspection ends before we reach the second chamber." Gideon went still. Grace looked down at the damp stone floor, then at the workers watching her. She thought of the night she saw the crane wagon at the sickroom loading door, the wheels wrapped in burlap to quiet them, the lantern held low, Rebecca's voice whispering that the Eastern Road would pay before the council noticed shortages. "The medicine was moved before the inventory was reported missing," Grace said. 3 crates. Winter tonic, fever root, dried mint, and sealed vials for lung sickness. The wagon bore the crane crest under a canvas cover. A stir passed through the chamber. Anna whispered, "My brother needed fever root last week." Grace closed her eyes for half a second, then continued, "I told the council. They asked why I was near the sick room at night. I said Mrs. Vale had a cough and needed tea. They asked why I had a spare key. I said the healer gave it to me because sickness does not wait for sunrise." Elias listened without interrupting, but the stillness of him changed with every sentence. Not rage, not the kind that filled a room and left no space for anyone else. This was colder, cleaner, more dangerous to lies because it did not waste itself. He turned to one of his guards. "Bring the medicine records and labor ledger here. Now." Gideon's face paled. "The ledger office is above. Then the truth can learn to climb," Elias said. "Grace Miller," he said, voice low enough that only those near him heard. "A bond is not ownership. If what I sense is what I believe it is, it changes my duty, not your freedom." Grace did not know what to do with the sudden ache those words opened in her chest. She had expected a king to demand. She had expected a wolf to claim. She had not expected the most powerful man in the North to stand in a labor pit and speak of her choice as if it were law. The guard returned with 2 ledgers and a sealed packet, setting them on a stone sorting table. Elias opened the labor ledger first. His eyes stopped almost immediately. Her pit assignment was entered 2 days before the council hearing. The workers went silent. Gideon stared at the page as if ink had turned against him. Grace looked at the line where her punishment had been written before her guilt was even performed for the pack, and the truth she had carried alone finally had a place to stand. The ink in the labor ledger did not tremble, but everyone looking at it did. Grace Miller, pit assignment approved, winter medicine debt, 2 days before council hearing. The line was neat, dated, initialed, and colder than any stone in the chamber because it proved what Grace had known in her bones. Her guilt had been decided before she was ever allowed to speak. Anna clutched her tin cup harder. The older woman near the sorting table whispered a name under her breath, maybe a prayer, maybe someone else who had entered the pits after a hearing that was only theater. Gideon Shaw stared at the page, his face tightening around calculation. "Clerical timing," he said. "Preliminary preparation for possible sentencing. Standard efficiency." Elias looked at him with the stillness of deep winter. "You prepared a punishment before truth." Gideon lifted his chin. The evidence was strong. Grace looked at the ledger, then at the medicine record sealed beside it. The evidence was convenient. Her voice was soft, but the chamber carried it. Elias opened the medicine packet next. The paper inside smelled faintly of wax, smoke, and winter herbs. He read silently for a moment, and Grace watched the muscle in his jaw tighten. He turned the sheet so his guard could see. Inventory marked missing at sunrise. He lifted a second page. Transfer receipt signed the night before. 3 crates released to Crane Transport for Eastern delivery. The workers went silent in a different way now, not stunned, but wounded by proof. Missing medicine meant children had coughed through cold nights. Missing medicine meant old wolves had rationed fever root. Missing medicine meant Grace had been sent below to pay for an absence someone else sold. Gideon's voice thinned. The Crane family manages trade routes. Emergency redistribution may have been authorized. Elias looked at the signature. Authorized by whom? Gideon did not answer. Grace remembered the lantern by the loading door, Rebecca's red cloak in the dark, the wagon wheels wrapped to keep quiet. She remembered thinking, for one foolish heartbeat, that if she simply told the truth would behave like light. But truth without protection had only made her visible to people who wanted a shadow to blame. Elias turned to a northern guard. "Send riders to the East Road checkpoint. Halt any Crane cargo bearing medicinal inventory. Seal the Ash River sickroom stores and council records." The guard bowed and left up the stone steps. Gideon moved as if to follow, then stopped when another guard shifted into his path. Elias did not look away from the ledger. Overseer Shaw is suspended from authority in these pits pending Crown review. The words moved through the chamber like fresh air reaching a place that had forgotten it could breathe. Gideon's face hardened. "Your Majesty, removing me will disrupt dead operations." Elias closed the ledger. "Good." A quiet sound passed through the workers, almost disbelief, almost relief. Grace felt it, and understood how long they had been waiting for one powerful person to say that the system should not keep running smoothly if it ran over people. Then Elias looked at the black-lettered tags hanging beside the intake table. Pit 7, Pit 9, Pit 12, numbers waiting to replace names. He reached for the tag Gideon had tried to give Grace and placed it on the ledger. No worker in this pit will be called by number during my inspection. Anna began to cry without sound. Grace stepped toward her, then stopped, unsure whether movement would be mistaken for interference. Elias saw the hesitation and moved aside, giving her room instead of permission that sounded like ownership. Grace went to Anna and touched the tin cup lightly. "What is your full name?" Anna swallowed. "Anna Reed." Grace nodded. "Hold on to that first." The scent of lavender and pine rain stirred again in the stale air, faint but impossible for Elias to ignore. He looked at Grace as she steadied another person while her own sentence unraveled on the table. The bond in him answered with a silver ache, but he held it like a vow, not a claim. "Grace Miller," he said, turning so every worker could hear. "You are not a prisoner of this pit. You are a protected witness of the crown." Grace looked at him, dust on her dress, fear still inside her, hope not yet trusted. "And the others?" she asked. Elias's eyes softened by the smallest degree. "We start with every name." The first list of names began at the intake table, where tags once waited to replace them. Elias ordered the black-lettered boards taken down and set beside the ledgers, not destroyed, not hidden, but placed where every worker could see what had been done. Pit 7 became Daniel Marsh, a quiet man who had been sent below for grain debt after a flood ruined his family field. Pit 9 became Nora Bell, a woman who had missed a council summons because she was caring for her sick mother. Pit 12 was not spoken again, because Grace Miller stood in its place, breathing cold dust and fragile freedom, while the chamber learned that names could return even underground. Anna Reed wiped her face with one sleeve and whispered her full name twice, as if testing whether it would stay. Grace stayed beside her, not because she was unafraid, but because fear felt different when it was shared in the open. Gideon Shaw stood near the wall under guard, stripped of command, but not yet of arrogance. "Names will not pay debts," he said. Elias turned slowly. "Neither will lies." A northern guard opened another section of the labor ledger. The pages listed debts, work assignments, hearing dates, and authorizing signatures. Some entries were messy. Some were too neat. Grace began to understand that neatness could be a warning when it appeared where human lives should have been complicated. Her own assignment had been written before her hearing. Anna's debt had been renewed after the original amount should have ended. Nora Bell's hours had doubled without council approval. Daniel Marsh's grain debt had no receiving signature. The pit was not disorder hidden beneath Ash River. It was order used as cover. Elias looked to Grace. "You said the crane wagon moved 3 crates." Grace nodded. "Winter tonic, fever root, dried mint, and lung sickness vials." "Who loaded them?" he asked. Grace closed her eyes for one breath, seeing the lantern again, the canvas, the quiet wheels. 2 men from the East trade route. I did not know their names. Rebecca Crane held the paper. Her father sealed it. Gideon gave a sharp laugh, without humor. An Omega sickroom worker identifying trade documents in the dark. Convenient. Grace felt the old humiliation rise, but it no longer owned her voice. "I know the Crane seal because I scrubbed wax from their medicine crates every spring." The chamber went still. Elias looked at Gideon. People noticed the marks left by those who never clean up after themselves. A few workers lowered their heads, not to hide laughter, but to hide the sudden dangerous relief of being understood. A guard returned from above with a message folded under Crown seal. He handed it to Elias, who read it once. "Crane cargo has been stopped at the East Road checkpoint," he said. 2 crates of winter medicine recovered. 1 crate opened and partially sold. The word struck Grace like cold water and fire at once. Proof. Not memory. Not accusation. Proof. Anna covered her mouth. Somewhere behind the workers, someone whispered that their child had needed those vials. Elias folded the message carefully. "Rebecca Crane is to be held for Crown questioning. Her family accounts are frozen pending review." Gideon's face lost color, but Grace barely saw him. She was thinking of the sickroom shelves, of empty jars, of Mrs. Vale coughing through the night, of every person told there was not enough while medicine traveled east under a family crest. Elias turned back to the workers. Every sentence connected to medicine debt is suspended. Every ledger will be copied under royal seal. Every worker may give testimony by name. Grace looked at him then, and the bond between them hummed softly beneath the coal and lantern smoke. Not demanding, not consuming, only present. He sensed it too. She saw the restraint in the way he kept his hands at his sides, the respect in the way he did not use destiny to hurry trust. "What happens to me now?" she asked. Elias's eyes met hers. "You choose the next step. You may leave the pits now, rest under guard, or remain while we read." Grace looked at Anna, Daniel, Nora, and the other faces waiting to become more than records. Her body ached. Her throat burned from the air. But the pit had stolen enough names while everyone above stayed comfortable. "I will remain until the last number in this chamber has a name," she said. Elias gave a single nod, and his voice carried through the underground hall. "Then the crown remains with her." Grace remained in the labor pit while the names were read, and every name changed the shape of the underground chamber. What had begun as an inspection became something quieter and more powerful, a return. Daniel Marsh stood straighter when his grain debt was marked for review. Nora Bell covered her face when a guard found the note proving her summons had been delivered to the wrong cabin. Anna Reed whispered the names of 2 younger workers who had been too afraid to step forward, and when they did, Grace repeated each name softly, as if helping the stone itself learn to remember them. Elias stood near the ledger table with the patience of winter and the focus of a king who had stopped accepting polished reports as truth. The mate bond stayed between him and Grace like a faint silver thread through coal smoke, but he never used it to pull her attention from the workers. That restraint reached her more deeply than any declaration could have. He had found her by scent, but he was choosing to know her by her actions. Gideon watched from the wall, his authority shrinking with every corrected record. "This will empty half the pits," he said at last, voice rough with anger he could no longer dress as procedure. Elias did not look up from the ledger. "Then half the pits should never have been filled." A silence followed, and this time it belonged to the workers, not to fear. Grace looked toward the stone stairs leading upward. Somewhere above, Rebecca Crane would be learning that clean gloves could not hide medicine crates forever. Somewhere in Ash River, council members would be rushing to explain why a hearing had been scheduled after a sentence was written. But down here, the first repair was simpler. Names, water, air, witnesses. A young man near the far tunnel swayed where he stood, exhaustion catching him before pride could. Grace crossed the chamber and steadied him by the elbow, asking before she helped him sit on an overturned crate. "What is your name?" she asked. "Evan Brooks," he whispered. "Then sit, Evan Brooks," Grace said. "No one earns dignity by falling over." A few workers smiled faintly, not because anything was easy, but because kindness had sounded almost ordinary in a place designed to make it rare. Elias watched her, and the bond in his chest rang again, soft and undeniable. He turned away for one breath, not to reject it, but to master himself before the room could mistake fate for command. When he faced her again, his expression was cold, but his voice held something steadier than coldness. "Grace Miller," he said, "the Crown has enough evidence to void your sentence immediately. You may leave this chamber now." Grace looked at the ledger still open, at the remaining tags lined on the table, at Anna's tired face and Nora's trembling hands. Leaving would be fair. Staying would be choice. "How many numbers are left?" she asked. A guard counted quietly. 11 in this chamber. More in the lower records. Gideon gave a bitter sound. "She cannot save everyone by standing here." Grace turned to him, dust on her skirt, lantern light in her eyes, and the calm that came when fear finally ran out of places to hide. "No," she said, "but I can refuse to leave while you pretend they are no one." Elias closed the ledger with one hand and looked at Gideon. "That is the difference between power and courage. Power leaves when it is safe. Courage stays when it is needed." The words settled over Grace like warmth she did not know how to accept yet. Elias then turned to all the workers. "Every person in this pit is under temporary Crown protection until each sentence is reviewed. Food, water, medical care, and rest will be provided above ground. No one will be forced back below tonight." For a moment, no one moved. Freedom announced too suddenly could sound like another trick to people trained by disappointment. Then Anna stepped forward first, not toward the stairs, but toward Grace. "Will you walk with us?" she asked. Grace felt the old ache in her throat, the one that came whenever someone trusted her before she felt strong enough to deserve it. She looked at Elias. He did not answer for her. He only stepped aside, clearing the path upward. Grace nodded to Anna. "Yes," she said. "We go by name." And one by one, beneath lantern smoke and northern guard, the erased began walking toward daylight. Daylight did not rush to welcome them. It waited at the top of the stone stairs like something the workers had forgotten how to trust. Grace climbed beside Anna Reed, one hand near the wall, her lungs aching from coal dust and her legs unsteady beneath the weight of too many hours underground. Behind her came Daniel Marsh, Nora Bell, Evan Brooks, and the others, each name newly written underground witness instead of hidden beneath a pit number. Elias walked behind the group rather than ahead of it. The choice was deliberate. He could have led them out like a conquering king, black armor shining beneath lantern light, wolf fur cloak carrying the authority of the North. Instead, he let the workers step into the open first, as if freedom had to belong to the people receiving it before it could become a royal victory. When Grace reached the pit gate, the cold morning had changed into a pale afternoon. Ash River's yard had filled with more guards, more records, more frightened officials pretending they had always intended to cooperate. Rebecca Crane stood near the council steps under watch, her red cloak no longer bright against the gray world, her clean gloves folded tightly around themselves. She saw Grace emerge from the pits and looked away before Grace could read shame or anger in her face. Gideon was brought up behind the last worker, silent now, his authority sealed inside the ledgers he had trusted to protect him. The pack watched the pit workers step into daylight, and the silence was different from the silence that had followed Grace's sentence. That morning, silence had been a crowd agreeing not to help. Now it was a crowd learning that every person they had called debt had a face, a name, and a story that might be read aloud. Elias turned to his guards. "Set food, water, blankets, and medical care by the council porch. No worker returns underground today. Every sentence is suspended until reviewed under Crown law." A few people gasped, but no one argued loudly. Proof had come up from the dark with dust on its clothes. Grace swayed once, barely, and caught herself before anyone could see. Elias saw anyway. He stepped toward the carriage, removed his dark northern cloak, then stopped with it in his hands. The mate bond between them stirred like a silver breath in winter air, but his voice stayed calm. "May I place this around your shoulders?" Grace stared at the cloak. It was not the first time someone powerful had offered her something in public, but it was the first time the offer came with a question instead of a condition. She nodded. Elias set the cloak over her shoulders gently, careful not to let his hands linger, careful not to turn fate into pressure. The warmth surrounded her, smelling faintly of pine, snow, and the cold road north. Anna smiled through exhaustion. Nora began to cry openly. Elias faced the yard, his expression unreadable again, but his voice carried to every porch and window. "Grace Miller is not a debt worker. She is a protected witness of the Crown." He paused, and every breath in Ash River seemed to stop with him. "And she is my mate's scent." The words moved through the pack like winter lightning. Grace felt every eye turn to her, and fear rose fast, old and sharp. Mate. A word that could become a cage if spoken by the wrong man. Elias turned toward her before the crowd could shape it into ownership. "A bond is not a claim," he said, loud enough for all to hear. "It is a vow to protect choice. She owes me nothing because destiny found her." The fear inside Grace did not vanish, but it loosened. She looked at the workers behind her, at the ledgers being carried from the pits, at Rebecca's pale face and Gideon's silence. Then she looked at Elias, the cold alpha king who had followed her into the dark and let her walk out by name. "Then my choice is to speak," she said. "For the medicine, for the ledgers, and for every number still waiting to be called human." Elias bowed his head, not as a ruler granting favor, but as a man honoring the first truth of the bond. "Then the North will listen." Grace's choice did not echo like a shout. It settled over Ash River with the quiet weight of a door being opened from the inside. She stood beneath Elias's northern cloak at the mouth of the labor pits, cold dust on her old gray dress, her faded brown coat hidden beneath black wool and wolf fur, her worn shoes still carrying the earth that had tried to claim her as debt. Behind her, the workers gathered in the pale afternoon with blankets around their shoulders and their names written under Crown Witness. Anna Reed drank water with both hands wrapped around the cup. Daniel Marsh stared at the sky as if he needed proof it was still there. Nora Bell held a warm cloth to her face and cried without hiding. Grace watched them and understood that leaving the pits was not the same as being free, not yet. Freedom would need records changed, hearings reopened, medicine returned, and every family that profited from silence made to answer. Elias seemed to know it too. He ordered the labor ledgers, medicine receipts, council notes, and intake tags sealed in separate boxes, each marked with the silver crown. He assigned guards to the sickroom, the council office, the Crane storehouse, and the pit gate. No one returned underground. No one was moved without a name and witness. Rebecca Crane stood on the council steps, pale beneath her red cloak, while a northern officer read the recovered medicine list aloud. Fever root, dried mint, winter tonic, lung sickness vials. Each item sounded small until Grace saw the old healer cover her mouth, because small things became life or loss when winter came hard. Gideon Shaw said nothing now. His silence had changed from authority to evidence. As the sun lowered behind the ash trees, Elias approached Grace but stopped several feet away, honoring the space he had promised with every action since the bond first sounded between them. "You may ride north tonight," he said, "or remain under guard until morning. The choice is yours." Grace looked at the pit gate. That morning, she had stood there as Pit 12, Winter Medicine Debt. Now the black-lettered tag lay sealed in a box with every other number that had failed to erase a soul. She looked toward Anna, Daniel, Nora, Evan, and the others, then toward the royal carriage waiting near the road, its blackened silver sides catching the last light. "If I stay," she said softly, "they will spend the night teaching fear how to sound reasonable again." Elias's eyes held hers, cold and steady, but not distant. "Then we leave while truth is still awake." He offered his hand to help her into the carriage and waited. Grace took it because she chose to, and because his grip remained careful, steady, and respectful. Inside, the carriage smelled faintly of cedar, leather, and snow. Elias sat across from her, leaving space between them, while the sealed ledgers were loaded into the guarded wagon behind. As Ash River began to move past the window, Grace saw workers standing outside the pit gate under royal protection, not cheering, not healed, but visible. Rebecca turned away. Gideon watched the ledgers leave like a man watching the ground remember his footprints. Far behind the council hall, a private rider would carry a warning before dusk, telling old families that the Winter Crown Alpha had found his mate in the labor pits and was reopening every Omega sentence tied to medicine debt. Grace rested one hand over the cloak at her shoulders and breathed through the fear that still lived beside hope. "You found me in the lowest place," she said. Elias looked toward the road north, where mist waited between dark pines. "No," he answered quietly. "I found you where they sent you. There is a difference." Grace turned back to the window as the first stars appeared above Ash River. The pits disappeared behind the hill, but the names came with her, sealed in ink, carried by law, and remembered by the woman who had refused to become a number. Destiny had found her underground, but justice was taking her into the light.